Hey, this is Web3 Talks. The rule of this podcast is simple. We only talk with people who have hands-on Web3 building experience. So if you are a hacker, entrepreneur, or investor, you can get inspired by their stories, lessons, and fuck-ups. My name is Mac, and I'm hosting this pod. If you want to stay in touch, go to twitter.com/web3talks, click the link in the pinned tweet, and join our Discord community. Let's go. So today's guest is Josef, founder of Pawn. And Pawn is an interesting project because it's like a decentralized pawn shop, but instead of bringing your TV and toaster to get money, you can bring your ERC20 tokens like Ethereum or Polygon or Chainlink, and you can bring your NFTs like Bored Apes, Aavegotchis or crypto dickbutts, if that's your thing. So the interesting thing is that you can bundle them together. So we have many NFT lending platforms, maybe not many, but a few. But here you can bundle together your tokens like ETH and your NFTs. So you can say, okay, I have 2 apes and 10 ETH and I want to get a loan for that, which is a pretty interesting solution. So Josef, what made you start Pawn?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Mathieu, for the invitation to join the podcast. Always happy to talk about our journey and then obviously learn from other podcasts as well, from other episodes, what other people are building on. So yeah, there is a lot that led me to Pawn, actually. There's actually multiple viewpoints. So if this gets too confusing, and stop me. Yeah, essentially, I've been in the ecosystem for quite some time. I started as meetup organizer, and then I dropped everything. I dropped my previous company and just dived into crypto, and it just kind of devoured me. And some people say they fell down a rabbit hole, but it just turned me into, I would say, like a crypto native, someone who believes, someone who uses his tech stack and believes in it in the long run. So it kind of goes beyond just investments and trading, but honestly, the best trading strategy for me would be to not touch my crypto ever. Just don't get exposure to it at all. Being a crypto native, being someone who's deeply rooted in the ecosystem through various projects and initiatives. I'm 30 now, being a millennial, I just decided this is the future for me, and this is something I want to keep my exposure to. So I guess there were multiple things that led me to it. First, being a crypto native and actually getting into the age of maybe being an adult and getting a roof over my head. I went to a bank a couple of years ago and I wanted to get a mortgage. At the time, I was working at the Ethereum Foundation and my salary was actually paid in ETH. So it wasn't denominated in ETH, but just paid in crypto because I wanted to live the crypto native way, right? And I went to the bank with my contract and the track of my transactions when my salary is paid out, because I figured this is what these guys will want to see. And the guy at the bank started laughing at me. He was like, this is not real money. You're not getting any mortgage. You don't have anything. I was like, no, I have these assets. I mean, even though a bunch of people don't recognize them, this is the future. This is not even just the future. It's now. This is happening right now. There's a whole economy around it. And obviously I have this contract saying how much I'm earning. Where's the issue? Well, then we basically stopped there. And for over 2 years, I actually started faking I have a failed income. So I started sending money into the bank account just to create this track record of actually, hey, I'm getting paid. And eventually I decided even to turn my salary into fiat, which is, it's a hurtful point. But it took me roughly 2 years to attempt it again. I went to the branch office. I was like, hey, all right, so here I have the contract. Here I have proof that I'm getting into the bank account. Can I get a mortgage now? And they were like, yeah, sure. So yeah, here's based on your income, this is how much you can get. This is our KYC form. And since back in the day and then the 2 years after, there was a new field. There was a new checkbox in the form, which basically said, are you anyhow exposed to cryptocurrencies? Are you a trader? Do you hold cryptocurrencies? At that point, I was like, no shit, I work for the Ethereum Foundation. Of course, I'm exposed to cryptocurrencies. This is my life. This is what I live. And that was it. That's the end of the story of my mortgage. And I was quite upset, right? Because I'm not just slacking, wasting my life. I'm actually working in a space. I do a lot of stuff, and now yet I would be denied of actually accessing the instrument that 80% of the market out there is using to finance their real estate purchases. And something flipped in me because I was like, hey, we have this entire DeFi. We have this like self-sufficient ecosystem already. Like we can just build a solution for that ourselves. We can just have mortgages that are backed by digital assets and borrow money from other, crypto degens, crypto native people that actually see the value in this. Like we don't need these intermediaries to tell us like what's acceptable and what's not. As long as there is a market, like we should be able to do this. And like now, you can do exactly this. You can collateralize like real estate, you can collateralize stocks, you can collateralize like entire stock portfolios in bonds, art, traditional art. It's just like you wouldn't be able to do it in crypto. Or at least like you were able to do it with crypto to some extent, right? And now I obviously would have a chance to just like go to Maker or Aave or just turn my entire portfolio into one token, get a loan against that, and then just like run off with that. But then there is a huge exposure for you actually to getting liquidated during like a one tiny price spike. And it happened to me in like there was, 2020, the March or something, during one of these crashes. The only reason I didn't get liquidated was the Maker Oracle didn't work at the time like properly because the chain was stacked. Otherwise I would be out. But yeah, like these things kind of led me into trying to figure out how we can build something that's like long lasting, how we can now take the ecosystem from today's standpoint, realizing that there is an actual market. I mean, there is a crypto native market, and there's an economy of projects that make enough revenue in fees, people being paid in crypto, and then again, like using these components, using these projects and infrastructure that could get us to a point where crypto just won't be this one large like 24/7 casino just for leverage and speculation, but where we can make, back to the gambling terminology, make bets that are lasting, that have actually this viewpoint of like 5, 10, 15, maybe even like 30 years. And that's why I essentially started working on this generalized like protocol where you can use anything as collateral. And this is our ultimate like holy grail. Like we want to enable crypto natives never have to sell their crypto, never have to lose exposure to those assets of the future in order to get access to the regular financial instruments that are available to the traditional finance. So this is the motivation, this is maybe the high level motivation, but there's more to it. There is like the fact that it's just a combination of factors, right? The second factor was that I wanted to get back into coding. So I wrote this like side project with this mindset, which was basically the first version of Pawn. It was like the Hack Money Hackathon in 2020. The contracts were called Proc Pound because, there was the debate around that time. And also the last factor is basically that I wanted to become a founder again. I wanted to build something contributing to the ecosystem in my unique way. And one of the last things that I did at the Ethereum Foundation was this fundraiser for clients, for execution clients, where I was essentially coming to the other like DeFi protocols and players in the space, fundraising for them, where like EF would match the funds and we would be able to give larger grants to the client teams. And like finally that got picked up, and there's like multiple initiatives in the ecosystem right now. But it was, again, like one of the last things before I finally left drove me into, I actually want to build something. I want to build a treasury, crypto native treasury, which recognizes the fact that this entire ecosystem and this entire stack is built on these on this baseline infrastructure. And this is also my public commitment to the community that once Pawn gets to the point where it generates enough revenue and it starts maintaining a treasury, it will contribute back to client development and to some baseline infrastructure on its own. So I guess a combination of the three.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you said, it turned out that the system that you live in, like the crypto system, was not compatible with the non-crypto system. And you said, okay, like we don't like these tools that they have, these banks and mortgage. So let's build something ourselves. Like we don't need them. And I really liked it because like you don't want to waste time convincing them. You can just build something for yourself and people like you. And you said one interesting thing about liquidations, because on Pawn, there are no liquidations. So like if I have my Bored Ape, I put it as a collateral, I take 100K and the floor price of Bored Ape goes down to 50K, I don't get liquidated. If I pay back my loan, everything is okay. So I'm wondering, like, why have you made this kind of decision? Because, like, I was thinking that it kind of puts more risk on a person that lends money. Because, okay, someone doesn't pay me back, I get the ape, but it's now worth like 50% of the value. So I'm wondering, like, why have you made this kind of decision?
Yeah, so it kind of like links back to what we are ultimately building, right? Like you introduce Pawn as this like digital pawnshop for tokens, which is right description. This is what it is now. But what we are trying to build in the long run is something more comprehensive. Even though there are new liquidations like in Pawn, like right now, thanks to like the architecture principles that we are taking, like you can add those later. But ultimately, and there are cases where like liquidations actually make sense, and it should be to the discretion of the user to actually say like if that's acceptable or not. But again, the base motivation in this case comes from like we kind of want to build a different product. There is a ton of like traditional DeFi lending where the lenders get all of the protection, and therefore, I mean, you get like crazier deals as well. But we wanted to bring a type of a product to the crypto native market, which kind of protects the borrowers as well, and kind of like sets the way people are thinking about borrowing and lending in the space. Because currently, because the lenders get all of those protections, like their reasoning is essentially just like let me put my money into this pool, and this is some like APY that's like out there. There's a market APY. This is what I get, and I'm fine with that. In our case, the rationale in becoming a lender in Pawn like is closer to like pricing an option, even though you don't need to go as far. But you basically make a bet on, well, this is the duration of the loan. This is fixed. And I'm setting my own risk and reward and potential reward on how do I want to price this. So I will only obviously accept collateral that I believe will still be valuable after the expiration. And I'll set the loan to value as basically the minimum where I feel I'll be comfortable the price of the collateral dropping. I'll adjust the APY, I'll adjust the interest that I'm asking for according to that. There's no liquidation, there is no way for you currently to get like 100% certainty, but this will also push you into a proposal that will establish like more rational pricing of the item. So it's just a different mindset that you need to take here. Also, there are different scenarios because we build this like open protocol with a lot of optionality. There are different scenarios where like you could be even the potential buyer of the asset, let's say a collector of an NFT, could be like member of the community, setting like better terms for other community members. You could even include things like reputation to the picture where you know the person who you're borrowing to or who you're lending to, therefore you will get them better terms because like even if you lose money on that, you still have some possibility of appeal or you just simply trust a person. And now like Pawn is part of the tooling for enabling these types of transactions. So, and even though currently we are seeing like loan to value around like 30-40%, which is quite low compared to other like over collateralized loans in DeFi, but it's also often the only way like you can actually use that as collateral. This is today's market, right? When you look at things like stocks or these like stock portfolios, you'll see something like 70 to 90% loan to value these days. And I think like this is ultimately where we're moving with digital assets as well. It will just take some time for us to get there. So today it's more risky. But again, our viewpoint here is long term. We are sure the pricing methods will improve, the certainty around certain assets will improve, and Pawn will already be here once these like markets catch up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if one day you want people to get a loan like mortgage for 20 years, they'd better not get liquidated when the housing market goes down because they will lose their house. If I take the step back, it makes perfect sense that you go this way. And I'm wondering because, I obviously tried Pawn because I try every product that we cover here. So I'm wondering like, how do you deal with the fact that, when people can post their offers without any gas fees, because you pay gas fee only when someone accepts the offer. How do you deal with, people trying to spam or like trolling your tool? Because it might be, one of the problems that arise from this openness.
Yeah, you're right. And this is ultimately, we obviously it's an iterative process. So we build the product on the go and we obviously spotted there's a lot of even like trash collateral or like just irrational asks. And we are moving more towards like better filtered setup where you'll be able to self-curate what type of collateral and what type of asks you're exposed to as a lender. So currently we started with like some very basic filtering. We'll add like collection-based filtering. We'll also, given that we started aggregating pricing data for the different sets of collateral, you'll be able to filter things out basically based on the market sentiment around them, based on like even price. So you'll be able to find like deals in your price group. So, I mean, obviously the question of like general spam, the platform itself is obviously like a traditional architecture. So currently you have to like sign, not like every offer, but sign for like a key that will enable you to post these things. Then if you decide to just like post like multiple prompts, I guess at some point we'll like rate limit just in case you wanted to DDoS the system. But that's a different type of question. But in the new version of how these loans are categorized, it shouldn't matter because like you won't see individual loan offers, but you'll just basically see asset pages where as a lender, you will just have ticks on those assets where there is a want, there is a desire to actually borrow against those assets. But ultimately, the answer is filtering.
Yeah, so for listeners who haven't seen Pawn, because Pawn is pretty niche project, so you might have not seen it yet, but you just like, for example, I have my Bored Ape and I say, okay, I want 100K, I can repay it in 30 days. And people give me offers. So they say, okay, I want 2% yield or I want 4% yield. And someone might say, okay, I want 4%, but I want it repaid in 60 days. So you as a person that wants to borrow money has more options, which is pretty cool.
There's also one new component, which is allowed thanks to the upgrade to the protocol layer, which is the contracts part, which we made, which is you as a lender or potential lender, you can make offers against collateral, which basically didn't even touch the platform yet. So you can basically say, hey, I would be willing to lend against this particular collection, but I don't know anyone who has these assets. But once you post the offer, the likelihood of someone actually showing up is higher because then they can just like browse and basically get a prompt. It's like, hey, well, you have this asset. Someone is willing to lend against it. So you might as well consider getting a loan in case you wanted some extra liquidity.
Just a short break to remind you that if you like this podcast, please don't hesitate to subscribe and give it a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you use. Thanks a lot. So, let's talk about the underlying tech because you are able to cover like ERC20, ERC721, ERC1155 tokens. So how have you designed the smart contract to, make it efficient when it comes to operating with these tokens?
Yeah, so as well as anything was like an iterative process. So essentially I wrote this like first version basically targeting like 721s. And I was like, hey, maybe 5 makes sense. And then as I was rewriting the contract, I was like, hey, let's just generalize it. So I ended up writing this multi-token library, which is just a wrapper around the basic functions that are needed in the protocol on these like major token standards. There's also an option to just upgrade it and like add new token standards to it. And then in every component and every piece of tooling that Pawn uses, we basically use this multi-token library. So by default, then anytime we use a multi-token, you can use any of these token standards in the protocol.
Oh, okay. Is this library like public? I guess it's public because
every piece of smart contract that we developed so far, except of the Pawn Safe, which we are first getting audited before we release the code base, is open source. And obviously the Pawn Safe will also be once it's audited. You can just go to our GitHub. And if you go to pawn.xyz, there's a link to GitHub in the footer, I think. And you can read all of these protocols, like all of the contracts, all are documented and all should have like their test scenario. So we have to actually people like look into those and give us some feedback.
Okay. And what are the biggest technical challenges so far?
So I guess like there's coming from the traditional point of view, just the simple like web app. It's like if you actually want to build the entire architecture like 100% crypto native, it's a lot of time and effort to like set up all of the nodes, having like IPFS nodes running, having all of the blockchain sync and so on. Well, obviously, as 95% of our projects, we are taking shortcuts in terms of like using like third-party providers of some of these. We are dedicated to switch that infrastructure at the point where we actually have the resources to do so. So we are running our own Ethereum node at least. But yeah, sure, we need to do much more. I mean, we basically want to run a node or even multiple nodes for every single piece of the decentralized architecture that we are using. And this comes with all of the technological trade-offs, such as like, yeah, well, it's nice to run these things, but there's also loading times, and you have to create a lot of caches if you want the data to be loaded and then like synchronize them and so on. So that's kind of the traditional part. I guess the smart contract part, I would say it's actually like getting things like audited and getting the conviction that like the thing is ready to fly. Obviously, audits are super pricey in the ecosystem. They take time. Like everybody has their hands full with work, so it's hard to find auditors with free capacity or auditors that wouldn't charge you like a kidney or something for their audit. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the challenging part on the side of the contracts. Otherwise, like, yeah, I mean, things are challenging, but it's the funny part, right? Like creating a contract which is efficient and like gas optimized. It's a nice challenge to have.
Yeah. It's like this maths challenge where you have to, make this like very clean mathematical proof or something like that. It gives a lot of satisfaction. So I'm wondering, because you are still like quite under the radar project, but you already have some users and there are like, I don't know, over 1,000 loans so far that I've seen on the platform. So I'm wondering, like, how have you acquired your first users and who have you focused on, borrowers or lenders?
So the beta protocol is live basically since June, and the first users were friends, essentially, like people that we talked to before, people that we gathered feedback from, that we pitched Pawn to and basically used their knowledge and kind of desires in building the protocol. And those were also the first people that we approached and basically said, hey, it's live. Like, if you want to go try it, we'll be happy for more feedback. And they gave us some initial users. So there are definitely some users that are kind of like values aligned with us, are, like our angels or advisors. And obviously that's like not super scalable. So that was the first step to get things moving. Ultimately, we built an open protocol without like whitelists. And we know it's kind of like counterintuitive in the sense of the majority of the startups is always told like focus on one niche and one market and just like dominate that. Our approach is slightly different in the sense that this is like a super quickly evolving industry. We don't want to be, just like a one-hit project, like let's say focus on NFTs. And we basically, our approach is build optionality, a lot of optionality, and enable us to discover like super early markets and be there for these early users. And that's why again, like we thought like building this in a peer-to-peer manner is fine. Building this as open as possible, even for the cost of enabling spam, is fine, because once these new communities emerge, like we can be there for them, we can serve them from the day one. And I believe that's a strategy what we should be taking, because like in a lot of the cases, we don't know what the assets of the future will be, like what particular community, like how those assets will behave. Our bet is essentially, well, these will in some way will be it will be like standardized tokens. And we don't know who those communities or users will be. So we basically now don't want to make any of these bets and just like remain open and talk to these communities, and then maybe start building like product specific features for these niche markets once we have a proven thesis that, well, this actually makes a lot of sense. Practically then what this means and what we do now is we focus on GameFi and DeFi as like two cohorts. We don't focus all that much on like NFT collectibles in the sense of like blue chip artists and that kind of stuff. Well, A, there are other players doing that, and we are happy that they do. B, it's also not as interesting really, because like those are very basic cases of like you hold an NFT and that's it. We are focused on like the more advanced cases of, well, yeah, you want to also use it productively in some way. You want to create like a comprehensive business model even around like each loan. So yeah, like these days, we are basically trying to talk to communities, go to community meetups, organize our own, attend like Twitter spaces, explain it to the various communities. We had a super nice traction and super nice response from the Aavegotchis community lately. There's basically completely organic growth, and we don't even have a clue. And that's ultimately what we are after. Like we don't want to know the users. Like we just want to have it there and literally be this like another primitive in the DeFi space, another piece of the tooling that people can build DeFi strategies around.
Yeah, so I really like this comment that you make, keeping this open and giving optionality it's kind of like sets the space for different users and they can pull your product in different directions. So it's like casting a very wide net and seeing where the fish are. And when you see the fish, you'll see, okay, here's the fish. So let's focus on this use case or that use case. And this GameFi really made me think, because many people think, yeah, I will just I have Bored Ape, I will get some money to just spend on my groceries and so on. But for me, the really interesting case is you play a game World of Warcraft, and you have a magic sword and you have some gold in this game, and you can actually put this as a collateral and just have real life money. And this is something really interesting and something very fresh and something that really plays into the strengths of NFTs, because you cannot do it in a closed system where, it's in Blizzard's database. So I really, really like this use case and it's really inspiring.
Yeah, and this is, again, that's kind of one of the components of GameFi. Even for this particular use case, that's why we essentially developed the pawn safe extension, because in the traditional sense, the collateral asset would have to be locked in an escrow. What we developed on the safe side is that you can now basically just generate this, we call it an ATR, asset transfer right, and then use that transfer right as collateral. But from a perspective of the game, you're still in possession of the item. You're still the owner, and you can use it in a game. You can, even if there's outside of the gaming, or if it's a DAO token, you can still use it to vote. And whatever you do can then kind of make you the revenue to actually be able to repay it. This is just basically the tooling component. The product side of this is the DeFi mortgage that we are going to release in Q1 in a beta mode, which will allow you to basically purchase assets that you don't have the full purchase price for, and then use those productively and then repay them.
Could you expand on that? Because it sounds interesting.
Yeah. So essentially, again, taking the iterative approach from Pawn, currently, if you have an existing offer on Pawn, if you're the asset owner, you can just obviously execute it and take a loan against the asset. But if you're a potential buyer of the item, and let's say the item is even on sale as buy now on LuxRare or OpenSea or somewhere, what you can do today, and you would have to do this manually, but we'll add it as one of the product components, is that we'll allow you to take the existing offer on Pawn, take a deposit of money, which is basically the top up of the purchase price, go and purchase the asset, and then lock it immediately as collateral in Pawn Safe, which is essentially what a real estate mortgage does, just in a traditional world. Here, this is going to be one single transaction with the automated execution.
Sounds really interesting. And how do you make it possible technically?
It's essentially just taking one extra step when you have the existing loan offer on Pawn. So you basically, those offers are signed against collateral, not against a user. There's an option to sign against a user as well, unless that's the case. If you have a liquid asset that you already have lenders for, you basically just combine, you take the offer, which is a signed blob, you throw it into in this automation wrapper, which then basically executes the offer, knowing that it's part of a wrapper, takes the money from the offer and your money as the deposit money, purchases the asset with the full price, locks it in this Pawn ATR model, and gives the loan token to the lender. There's just two extra steps on top of what's happening now in one execution call.
I really like this idea, because it's the second thing that we talked about here that really plays into strengths of crypto. Very crypto native thinking. So what has been the most interesting collaterals that you have seen so far on Pawn?
Lately, certainly is so. I was thrilled when the Nation3 DAO issued its bond over Pawn. There was every time we have this the first time that happens, right? So initially I was even happy that a noun was used as collateral. But now with what Nation3 has shown is that you can use Pawn as essentially a way to issue these convertible notes if you are a DAO. So it doesn't even have to be like a single user. It doesn't have to be an individual, right? But like you can even use this on this like DAO institutional level for useful things. Now, recently, the fact that Aavegotchis are using the Aavegotchi community are using the Gotchis locked in the Gotchi vault, which basically does the betting for them. But then these receipts are used as collateral. That's also like pretty interesting case, and it exactly follows this like GameFi aspect, right? Like this is a productive thing that people are using, but now they actually figured, well, there is an opportunity for a lending market to be created around those. So yeah, I guess these are the two from the most interesting parts. Last week, from kind of the like worth mentioning ones, there's definitely the I think actually the largest Beeple NFT backed deal that did happen on Pawn, which is also like a funny NFT on its own. And that one is interesting because we actually there was this like article published last January, I think, which mentioned the proposition of like, hey, this would be possible. And now I'm excited because it actually happened. So I think it was taken more as a joke, but it was $250,000 lended against that particular NFT, which I think is kind of crazy. Like really shows you the fact that, well, these assets will be able to even secure a mortgage for like a flat purchase or a house purchase in a foreseeable future.
Yeah, I wish I read, this mainstream media headline, like someone borrowed $250,000 to an owner of a dick milking factory NFT. This looks like a banger. So, okay, so I'm wondering, what has been, the hardest trade-offs that you had to make so far? Because as you said, on one hand, you keep it very open, but I guess there are some trade-offs and hard decisions that you have to make.
Yeah, I mean, I think I tackled on a bunch of these. I'm not sure if I would like them like hardest trade-offs, but these are definitely trade-offs that we had to discuss and like actually decide about them. So one of which is, well, this like openness versus focusing on a super narrow niche, where we obviously took the approach of openness. There is a trade-off on architecturally, at least like temporarily utilizing like third parties instead of building this like completely in a decentralized manner and allowing like self kind of sufficient front ends to operate as well. Currently, that's not possible, but it's again definitely something that's in our pipeline somewhere once we actually make it to the point when this will become possible for us, even technically. And I don't think there were like any super hard trade-offs. It was actually pretty clear in terms of the values alignment and what we actually want to build as a company.
Okay. And I'm wondering, like, if you were not building Pawn, what would you build?
I guess I would stay within the Ethereum Foundation because it was still super exciting space to be in. And you get to work with like super bright and motivated people. So that's definitely a nice environment to stay in. I guess I'll also spend much more time just maintaining the Bordel hackerspace in Prague. And yeah, I even had a thought of actually starting like a branch of Paralelnipolis in Zurich in Switzerland. So I guess if I had the time, these things would be the focus.
Okay. And as you worked in Ethereum Foundation, I guess you have seen quite many crypto projects. So I'm wondering, like, what has been something that blew your mind or was like super inspiring to see?
Yeah, I guess like these things even go beyond EF, but there is, I don't know, things like Maker, like the paradigm defining moments when you actually see the first very theoretical case being put into practice and actually work. So I guess like Maker was actually one of the, obviously after Ethereum, was one of the major like discoveries that literally it changed my opinion about something, right? That actually made me realize like what is possible. Or even I think good example, I actually mentioned it recently in one of the Twitter spaces, like Pull Together is also a super nice project in terms of showing that DeFi and smart contracts can enable something that wasn't possible before. So these types of things, I wonder, like obviously, cases like, or then the story cases, like something like Uniswap, like a thing that started as a EF grant and turned into this ultimate like challenger of all like centralized exchanges that just story I want to witness, right? Like I want to be here as like something I want to keep witnessing in the next decades.
Yeah, and the story of like Hayden that where he met Vitalik and he has shown his code on mobile phone, and Vitalik just scrolled through and said like, yeah, it makes sense. Have you considered writing it in Viper? And he was like, and then Hayden just like learned Viper and just rewrote the whole code. I mean, the story behind Uniswap is really fascinating. So, if you had a magic wand and could fix one thing about Web3, what would you fix?
Because if that was only one thing, then I guess like especially in this day and age, obviously the bear market helps with that a lot, but it would just make all the grifters disappear. Because that's one of the most annoying things about Web3 is kind of like how many people you get to meet, especially in the times of the largest like hypes that obviously are here for very obvious and very simplistic reasons. And I'm not, it's natural. I'm not saying that they are like somewhat undeserving, but it's sometimes it's just like, I guess, like draining motivation when you see, all of these like grassroots builders and people who just don't do this with the primary target of like making money and actually want to create something that's changing the paradigm, that's like moving us towards a fair world. And then every 3 years you have this like group of dudes that just show up to conferences and to developer conferences even and tell you about money making thing. And it's just like gets annoying. But like now, it's hard to complain about this because like we are in the bear market again. So things kind of cleared out to a large extent.
Yeah. I kind of feel that there's less distraction now. Like in bull markets, I was like looking at Twitter because there was this heavy FOMO because of all the opportunities, but also because of all the distractions. But right now, it's so quiet there, apart from some SBF threads. Like it's super quiet, so you can just focus on building and just don't care about this crap. So this is really cool.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like making profits like in crypto is bad. There's a lot of useful stuff that can be like funded with the money, or it's even just like if someone does it as a business, that's fine. But then I feel like there was a disproportion of the people at certain times where it was like really annoying, and that wasn't part of the ecosystem. I think like people will be just overall happier.
Yeah, and also they bring a lot of bad press because they get covered in the media. So, Josef, I have two last questions. So the first one is where people should go if they want to learn more about Pawn.
Oh yeah, thanks about that. Definitely the website. So pwn.xyz. It's our Twitter, Pawn DAO. You can also find like links on the website to our Discord. We're hosting onboarding sessions. We are jumping on community AMAs with our projects as well. So please engage there. Reach us out over Discord or Twitter. And as I mentioned, like we are still in the discovery phase. So if you have input, if you have ideas, if you wanted to contribute somehow, please let us know. If you think what we are building is a complete BS, let us know as well. Like we want to know why. We want to know like what do you feel like we should change design wise. And again, like we are building this for the crypto native industry and for crypto natives. So if you feel like you could utilize what we built so far, please get in touch and we'll be happy to even show you how things are used and so on.
Okay, thanks for that. So the last question, Josef, do you have any idea for a next guest, someone that I might talk with that might be some builder that might share their story and talk about their project?
I mean, there's now coming up with the names, but well, definitely. I mean, like one of my favorite people, like in the space, Mario Havel from DEF, part of the protocol support group. He's a super resourceful builder. Tomasz from Nethermind maybe could be also interesting. Lefter is building Rotkey. Jared Ho from Status. I guess these, but I can send you a list later on.
Okay. So, Josef, like, thanks a lot. I know that you are in quite a rush. So, and I'm also preparing for the World Cup game between Brazil and Croatia. So thanks a lot for this conversation, and see you somewhere. And I tried using Pawn. No one accepted my offer yet, but maybe the next time I will be more lucky.
Awesome. Well, check it out. Definitely ping us on Discord. See if we can get your case promoted somehow.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for the invite. Have a great one.
So this is almost the end, but if you like this episode and don't want to miss the next ones, feel free to subscribe. If you liked it a lot, I'd be personally grateful if you could give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you use. Thanks to these ratings, more people can learn about Web3 Talks, and it's really important to me. That's all for today. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.